The hearing room was already vibrating with noise, cameras snapping like popcorn, reporters whispering into microphones, aides rushing papers across desks. It felt less like a congressional hearing and more like the eye of a political storm gathering strength. And at the center of that chaos sat Eric Trump, leaning forward with the swagger of someone convinced the room was his stage. He repeated the same line he'd been parroting for weeks, the one number he believed would shield him from scrutiny, the one claim he thought no one would dare challenge, $700 million. He said it again, louder this time, as if volume could make fiction sound like fact. Some committee members glanced at each other, tight-lipped. Others stared down at their notes, unwilling to engage. The tension in the air shifted, heavy, but expectant. Eric smirked, confident he had seized control. But then Jasmine Crockett straightened in her chair. The transformation was subtle, almost invisible to the untrained eye, but the room felt it. A change in temperature. A pause in the static of whispered conversations. She looked directly at Eric Trump, her expression calm enough to be mistaken for polite interest, until she opened her mouth. "Mr. Trump," she said, her voice cutting clean through the noise, "before you repeat that number again, I need to ask you one simple question." Every camera in the room swung toward her. Reporters froze mid-sentence. Even Eric stopped blinking. Because everyone sensed it. A line had been crossed. But none of them were prepared for the sentence that would flip the entire hearing upside down. The truth was that the $700 million number didn't just appear out of thin air. It had been carefully planted, repeated, and amplified in a political climate already drowning in misinformation. For weeks leading up to the hearing, Eric Trump had toured sympathetic media outlets, insisting that this colossal figure represented some grand injustice, some catastrophic misuse of funds that only he and his circle supposedly understood. He framed it as proof of corruption, as evidence of a system stacked against his family, and as a rallying cry for those who felt forgotten or misled. Every time he said it with certainty, as if confidence could substitute for evidence. Memes, headlines, and conspiracy threads exploded across social platforms. Hashtags trended overnight. Influencers with millions of followers pushed the narrative without a hint of skepticism. Talk radio ran with it. Cable news panels debated it. Some even called it the smoking gun of the year. To Eric Trump's allies, the number wasn't a statistic, it was a weapon, a shiny object they wielded to feed resentment and distract from questions they didn't want answered. But the problem with a number that big, that dramatic, that politically convenient, is that it demands scrutiny. Real scrutiny. And once the committees started investigating, once documents surfaced and testimony was reviewed, the math stopped adding up. The timeline broke. The receipts didn't match. That's why this hearing mattered, not just for the claim itself, but for what it symbolized. In a time when truth was treated like a nuisance and spectacle replaced substance, this moment represented a test: would facts survive the noise? For many Americans watching, especially immigrants and marginalized communities who understood how power twists narratives, this wasn't just political theater. It was about dignity. It was about whether facts still stood a chance against volume, privilege, and inherited influence. She had watched the narrative inflate, watched the theatrics unfold, and waited with the patience of someone who trusted evidence more than ego always. And yet, the one person who saw through it from the beginning was sitting quietly at the end of the panel. Eric Trump had walked into the hearing with the kind of confidence that didn't come from truth, but from years of being told that truth didn't apply to him. Before he even took his seat, he glanced around the room with a half smirk, the kind that said he believed the outcome had already been decided in his favor. Cameras clicked, and he leaned into them like a performer preparing for his close-up. It was clear he wasn't here to answer questions, he was here to put on a show. From the moment the hearing began, he clung to that oversized number as if it were a lifeline. 700 million, he repeated again and again, rolling the words slowly, dramatically, as if savoring the shock value. Every time he said it, he spread his hands wide, palms up, exaggerating the scope, as though the gesture alone could make the claim real. But the more he talked, the more obvious it became that his story was stitched together with bravado, not evidence. Committee members tried to pin down details, dates, documents, sources. Each time, Eric's answers wobbled. Timelines shifted. Facts blurred. What he had proclaimed confidently in interviews became vague under oath. When pressed about where the number came from, he dodged, redirected, or inflated new figures on the spot. His contradictions piled up faster than the stenographer could type. Each inconsistency made him more defensive. His voice grew louder, not steadier. When a representative attempted to clarify a point, Eric cut in impatiently. When another challenged the math, he waved them off with an irritated flick of his wrist. He tried to dominate the room by sheer force of tone, talking over members as though their questions were interruptions to his monologue. At one point, he even stood slightly, pacing behind his chair as he rattled off rehearsed lines that no longer matched the documents in front of him. The arrogance was unmistakable. He wasn't speaking to the committee, he was performing for an imagined audience beyond the walls, convinced that sound bites would protect him even if facts didn't. But every smirk, every evasive answer, every boast only deepened the sense that he was cornering himself. The more he insisted he was right, the more the cracks in his story widened. The committee saw it. The viewers at home felt it. And even Eric, beneath his swagger, seemed to sense the ground shifting under his feet. Because while he was busy acting untouchable, the real work was happening quietly on the other end of the dais. But what Eric didn't know was that someone had already traced every number and every lie. While Eric Trump basked in the glow of his own theatrics, Jasmine Crockett sat several seats down, posture steady, eyes lowered to the stack of documents neatly arranged before her. She didn't fidget, didn't sigh, didn't roll her eyes the way some members did when the hearing dragged on. Instead, she moved deliberately, flipping pages with the quiet assurance of someone who already knew where the truth lived. In a room full of noise, she was the only one who seemed immune to it. Her background had trained her for moments like this. Years in civil rights law, fighting for people who didn't have wealth, power, or famous last names, had molded her instincts. She had spent her career spotting the gaps between what people said and what the evidence proved. She understood how privilege tried to rewrite reality. And she understood, more than most, how a single fabricated number could ignite a wildfire of misinformation that burned communities who rarely got the chance to defend themselves. But today, she wasn't here to lecture. She wasn't here to trade insults or score cheap sound bites. She was here with a purpose sharper than any political spectacle: accountability. While Eric Trump rambled, she highlighted passages, circled figures, and cross-referenced data with the precision of a surgeon preparing for a delicate incision. She didn't interrupt him. She didn't react to his smug glances. She simply studied the evidence, waiting. Because Crockett knew the difference between noise and vulnerability. She could hear the inconsistencies in his testimony like offbeat notes in a song. She tracked every shift in his story, every inflated claim, every attempt to cover one contradiction with another. And with each one, her plan crystallized. Her colleagues noticed her calm. They had seen her dismantle arguments before, not with volume, but with clarity. There was a reason the public saw her as a rising force, a defender of truth in a political landscape suffocating in distortion. When she spoke, she didn't seek approval. She saw precision. She wasn't interested in winning an argument. She was interested in revealing reality. And that was why today mattered. Not because Eric Trump had walked in confident, but because she had walked in prepared. Every lie he repeated was another thread she would quietly pull until the whole fabric unraveled in his hands. She wasn't there to argue. She was there to prove. And when Eric Trump bragged one more time about the 700 million, she raised her eyebrow, just slightly. The shift began with a single question, simple, direct, and delivered in Jasmine Crockett's signature steady tone. Mr. Trump, can you verify the source of the 700 million? The words were calm, almost gentle, but the effect was immediate. Eric's shoulders stiffened. His eyes darted between the committee members, searching for a friendly face, a lifeline, anything that might help him steer the moment back into theatrics. Well, I've said it many times, he began, forcing out a laugh that didn't quite land. Everyone knows about the 700 million. It's public. It's obvious. But the confidence wasn't there anymore. The swagger had softened at the edges. Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't lean forward. She simply asked the next question. Public where? A ripple moved through the room, quiet, but unmistakable. Several reporters lifted their heads. A cameraman zoomed in. Eric blinked rapidly. Everyone's talking about it, he snapped. It's all over the place. You should know that. Crockett let the silence stretch, watching him with an expression so measured it bordered on surgical. I am aware of what people say, she replied. I'm asking what you can prove. A few people in the audience gasped. Eric's jaw tightened. That's not, you're twisting my words, he said, voice growing louder. He tried to talk over her, slipping back into the strategy that usually worked on cable news panels. But this wasn't cable news, and Jasmine Crockett wasn't going to let him filibuster his way out. She calmly lifted a hand. Reclaiming my time. The phrase sliced clean through his outburst. He froze, caught between frustration and disbelief. Another camera clicked. Whispering erupted behind the press barricade. She continued, each question a precise strike. Can you provide a document? A date? A name? A single receipt supporting your claim? With each inquiry, Eric Trump's tone shifted. The arrogance drained first, replaced by irritation, sharp, unsteady, laced with impatience. And then, as her questions cornered him further, irritation turned to something unmistakable, panic. He shuffled papers that didn't match his story. He repeated talking points that no longer aligned with the facts. He interrupted again. Mr. Trump, she said, unbothered, your inconsistency is noted. But I need you to answer the question before us. Her composure made his frantic pacing look even more out of place. His voice cracked slightly as he attempted another deflection. The room felt smaller now, tighter, as though everyone sensed the tension coiling toward something inevitable. Because Crockett wasn't simply challenging him, she was walking him into a corner he had built himself, brick by shaky brick. Answer the question, she repeated softly. And then she reached for a single sheet of paper, and the room went completely silent. Jasmine Crockett held the sheet of paper with the calm precision that had become her trademark. She didn't wave it theatrically. She didn't lean forward or raise her voice. She simply placed it on the table, opened it, and let the evidence speak for itself. The numbers were laid out meticulously, bank statements, tax filings, receipts, and internal memos. Every calculation showed the $700 million claim was mathematically impossible. Every cited source contradicted Eric Trump's previous statements. Every line exposed the inconsistencies he had tried to gloss over with volume and bravado. The evidence wasn't aggressive, it was undeniable. Eric's composure faltered immediately. His eyes blinked faster, uncomfortably aware of the eyes on him. His hands, which had been so assured in their gestures, now fidgeted with his papers. He shifted in his seat as though the chair itself were betraying him. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. The confidence that had filled the room just moments ago evaporated, replaced with a visible, almost palpable panic. Crockett began her methodical delivery. She cited financial definitions, legal precedents, and chronological inconsistencies that left no room for escape. According to the filings submitted to the IRS, she said, the revenues do not align with the claimed figure. The timeline of the transactions you referenced contradicts your public statements. And multiple internal audits, which you signed off on, directly disprove the $700 million assertion. Her voice remained steady, measured, almost soothing, but each word struck like a hammer. The room grew tense. Members of the committee leaned in, reporters' fingers hovered over keyboards, capturing every syllable. Every eye was locked on Eric Trump, whose smug grin had vanished entirely, replaced by the vacant, frantic stare of someone realizing their stage act had crumbled. Sweat beaded at his temples. He shuffled his papers, searching for a script that no longer existed. Then came the question that silenced him entirely. Crockett's voice cut clean through the anxious murmurs. Mr. Trump, can you explain where that $700 million actually came from? He opened his mouth, paused, and for the first time in public, there was nothing, no explanation, no justification, no rehearsed answer. Just silence. The room felt suspended, as if the air itself were holding its breath. Cameras clicked in unison, reporters typed furiously, and committee members exchanged knowing glances. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone present. A lie of monumental scale had been exposed, and the person who perpetrated it had no words to defend himself. Crockett leaned back slightly, her eyes still fixed on him, calm and unyielding. Then, with the precision of a final, deliberate strike, she delivered the line that would echo beyond these walls: if the number isn't real, the story isn't real either. Eric Trump's head lowered slightly, his expression vacant, defeated. The bravado, the arrogance, the inflated claims, all of it had collapsed in front of a nation watching. And within minutes, the shockwaves had already started spreading beyond the walls of Congress. The clip went viral almost instantly. Within minutes, hashtags like #CrockettExposes, #700MillionLie, and #Silencing Congress began trending across every major platform. Reaction videos flooded feeds, each one replaying the exact moment Eric Trump froze, mouth agape, as if the weight of truth had physically pinned him to his chair. Late-night shows grabbed the footage, looping it, dissecting every gesture, every blink, every faltering word. Headlines splashed across screens, the silence heard around the internet: Crockett crushes Trump in historic hearing, truth versus arrogance, watch the moment history paused. Journalists, political analysts, and influencers dissected the evidence she had presented, praising her surgical precision and unwavering composure. Clips of her calm delivery spread further than any talking point Eric Trump had tried to push for weeks. Social media users from all walks of life shared the moment with captions that ranged from awe to celebration, many noting how rare it was to witness someone dismantle such a powerful figure without theatrics or aggression. Even political figures, including members of Congress who had previously remained neutral, tweeted in admiration. They commended her for holding the powerful accountable, for turning a theater of arrogance into a lesson in accountability and dignity. Meanwhile, Eric Trump's allies scrambled frantically to salvage the narrative. Statements were issued, clips re-edited, talking points revised, but the damage was clear. The lie had been exposed in front of millions. The story had shifted irreversibly. The nation watched as the ripple effect spread beyond politics, communities discussed it in living rooms, college campuses, coffee shops. The question of truth, integrity, and public accountability dominated conversation like never before. But Jasmine wasn't done. She had one more message, this time for the entire country. In the quiet that followed the storm, Jasmine Crockett's actions resonated far beyond the walls of the hearing room. She reminded the nation that truth was not negotiable, that accountability was not optional, and that leadership required courage, clarity, and the willingness to stand for what was right, even when the powerful trembled before exposure. Her calm precision became a symbol, a reminder that dignity could disarm arrogance and that facts, when wielded with integrity, could outshine any spectacle. For the immigrant families, the students, the communities who often felt voiceless, this moment offered validation, a demonstration that justice was not just an abstract ideal, but a living principle upheld by those willing to act decisively. Democracy depended on people like her, on vigilance, preparation, and moral courage. No matter how big the lie, no matter how loud the deception, truth eventually finds its voice. And in that voice, the nation was reminded that integrity always carries the final word. Jasmine Crockett didn't just challenge a lie, she exposed it for the world to see, leaving Eric Trump speechless and the nation awakened to the power of truth. This moment proves that courage, preparation, and integrity can topple even the loudest arrogance. If you believe in accountability, in leaders who act with dignity, and in a democracy that values honesty over spectacle, now is the time to stand with that truth. Subscribe, share this video, and join a movement committed to holding the powerful accountable. Together, we amplify voices that refuse to be silenced.